Let's go ahead and talk about 10 things that I feel like people still get wrong about The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. Let's get it. One thing that people get wrong about Breath of the Wild is actually tied to the development of the game. There was a rumor before the game's release that there would be an option to play as a female version of Link, the repeatedly reincarnated Hero of Time. This was actually just a joke comment taken way out of context by fans. Anuma, who heads the Zelda series, rolled back his joke with an official statement that the Link from the trailer was, in fact, a male. Pretty interesting, isn't it? The Hyrule Historia made a lot of waves on release, and not necessarily for good reasons. Fans of the Zelda series had pieced together vague connections between games, unofficially of course, but the release of the book made a lot of these fans' theories canon. As such, Breath of the Wild is the latest game to take place in the entire series, with all timelines leading to its eventuality. However, the Hyrule Historia gets a lot of things wrong or outright contradicts the game, so it's taken with a grain of salt in the Zelda community. Link rarely encounters male Gerudo in his travels. I mean, technically, the only one encounterable in Breath of the Wild is Calamity Ganon itself, though Ganon no longer takes the form of a Gerudo after all of this time. However, Ganondorf is actually a rare outlier of Gerudo males. The Gerudo males are born once in a century, sure, but just because they are destined to rule with great strength, it doesn't mean every male Gerudo in history was destined to turn evil, right? One of the main things that differs Breath of the Wild from the other Zelda games is its difficulty. I know I struggled a lot. The game has a number of complex systems, and just about everything is interactive, making for an overwhelming experience for beginning players. I know that's one of the biggest gripes that I had when I first played, is that there's just so much to do. It's still an amazing game. It's still an amazing Zelda game. There's just so much you can do, and it's distracting sometimes. Now, however, the controls are intuitive, mechanics are definitely explained throughout the game, and several mechanics are nowhere near as hardcore as some of the other games out there. It's actually pretty easy to pick up, just don't expect everything to be given to you. Now, one thing Breath of the Wild does differently than the other Zelda games is the ability to break weapons, right? Every single weapon in the game can break when used enough, as indicated by the weapon's durability in the menu. It's a mechanic that can be frustrating at first, but it's much nicer than the same sword for the entire game. Each weapon has a different moveset or attributes associated with it, so it's actually well worth trying out a variety of weapons to figure out which ones are more fun for you as the player. Breath of the Wild is an interesting case in the Zelda series. Zelda fans alike are theoretically able to take on Calamity Ganon literally right off the bat, and some especially skilled players have done it just that to speedrun the game in no time at all. It can be a pretty long game when you get lost in it, like roughly 100 hours I believe, but ultimately it's only as long as the player wants it to be. Let's be honest, if beating the main quest is all that matters to you, a focused effort can down a Ganon in less than 15 hours. Completing every side mission and collecting everything, that is a completely different story, my friend. It's a simple one, but one that not every fan of the series knows. Now, despite being so commonly associated with the Nintendo Switch, one can actually buy the Breath of the Wild on another system too, the ill-fated Nintendo Wii U. The gameplay functions much the same as it did in the HD port of Twilight Princess, and the Sheikah slates in the game were specifically modeled with the Wii U gamepad in mind. Now, here's a pretty big misconception among casual fans of the Zelda series, is that Link and Zelda are, in fact, elves and not people. This stems from two things: their pointed ears and Link's direct connection with the Kokiri in Ocarina of Time. However, Link and Zelda are not people, and they are not elves. They're actually Hylians. Comparisons to traditional races are understandable though, thanks to Link's elegance in combat and elf-like agile body. A common misconception among hardcore fans of the Zelda series is that Zelda herself is the reincarnation of the goddess Hylia. This is based on a mistranslation from an earlier Zelda title, and in fact, Zelda is just the blood of Hylia, not directly the goddess herself. It's extremely easy to dive too deep into hot takes on video game lore sometimes, I know, especially with the Zelda series, but most of the time, the simplest and least lore impactful answers to questions like this are generally the right ones. Finally, people who haven't begun their adventure in Breath of the Wild yet are sure to misunderstand a few things about how the progression works in Breath of the Wild. By finding Korok seeds, which are completely optional, Link can increase either stamina or health, and there are a bunch of other collectibles spread throughout Hyrule as well. However, collecting everything is absolutely not necessary to beat the game. It'll make traversing the terrain, beating enemies, and one's overall experience super easy and one's overall experience easier, but spending hours collecting items is no one's idea of a fun time, unless you're me. That's the part I love about the Zelda series, is collecting all the individual goodies in a game, particularly the Zelda game. If you found value in this video, be sure to click here to watch some more Zelda content, subscribe to join the crew, and hey, I appreciate your time. Much peace and love, my friend. Be that light.